So, hello, my name is David Helbock. I'm a jazz piano player and composer from Austria. But today it's not about myself. Today I'm interviewing my longtime teacher, mentor and friend, Peter Madsen. Peter Madsen was born in Wisconsin, United States, then later moved to New York and had a long and successful career in the jazz field. He played with a lot of famous jazz musicians from actually very different kinds of jazz styles, like with traditional guys like Stan Getz or Stanley Turrentine, with modern guys like Chris Potter or Joe Lovano, with free jazz guys like Don Cherry or Dewey Redman, with the New York downtown scene, with musicians like Mario Pavone or Thomas Chapin, but also with funky musicians like Fred Wesley or P.B. Ellis. Then later in 2001, I think, or 2000, he moved to Austria, where he founded a lot of his own groups, mainly the CIA, Collective of Improvising Artists, and also started to teach. And there, when I was 16, I first met him. And he showed me maybe actually all I know about music and jazz and piano. So I owe him a lot. Welcome, Peter Madsen.
Thank you. What a nice introduction. Yeah. I was actually thinking today, when was the first moment I remember meeting you?
Yeah.
And I remember it was in Helbock. That's maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I remember. And I remember it was because of 9/11, wasn't it? There's a concert and I played a solo thing. And then afterwards, I remember I see this young kid sitting on the staircase. Do you remember that? I remember you were sitting on the stairs, and you were kind of shy and insecure, and I just said hello, or somehow we said hello, and then we just got talking, and you were looking for a teacher, and then it went from there. And that's what I remember. Is that right?
I remember it. Yeah,
something like that.
Actually, it's very funny because that would have been my first question.
So there you go. See,
and
intuition. See how many years we know each other.
No, I actually wanted to start with a really deep question. Like,
okay.
Why do we make music, and how does music give hope to people in times of crisis? Because I remembered the same. There was 9/11, and a lot of concerts were cancelled. I remember, but you came on stage and you said we have to do it anyway.
That's right.
And I remembered it was the first concert I saw you, but also one of the most emotional concerts I ever went. And and also today of the Corona crisis, we, especially musicians, we have a lot of concerts cancelled. And
absolutely.
And how do you think about that? How do you remember back then that, because you just came from New York?
I had just come, My memory, first of all, I remember I was at the Media Markt, and I was looking for buying a television. So I was in the TV section just looking for a TV, and there was this, what it, to me seemed like a movie. I really thought it was a movie. I thought it was, one of those, the airplane does something and falls apart, but it was like weird. And then it was said, no, this was really happening. And so that memory sticks powerfully in my brain of this can't be real. Is the world really like this? Is it that extreme? Is it that bad? Is it that over the top in a way? Like not even something I could believe was real. It still doesn't make sense to me. And since then, of course, there's all the different reasons why it happened, or who really did it, and all the, conspiracy theories, which some might be true, who knows. But the point is that people are doing something to each other, hurting each other, or not helping each other, even put it in a positive way. That, hey, man, these guys are doing something against people. Why? Why do people? It's been one of my things about my life, in a way, why music is important is, why do people hurt each other instead of caring for each other? Why? It doesn't make any sense to me, except some people are greedy, or they want everything, or they want what you have, or they just disagree with you, so they want to hurt you, or They just want, they're not satisfied. They don't want to live together. They want to live separately or whatever. I'm better than you. Whether it's religion that does that or whether it's people that does that or government that does that and on and on. So I think the importance of music, to get back to your kind of question, to me is really, there has to be a counterweight to this awfulness. And to me, that's really what music is about. We need this kind of inner positive presentation of feelings, and that we can, on one side, recognize the bad things or the evil things or the negative things, but we can also then say, hey, we can transform it through music into something positive, that we can be a community, that we can help each other, that we can love each other, that we can live together, all those things. And you can go on and on about that. But to me, how I've always seen music is been that way, is as one of the ways of music. Music has many purposes, of course, but to me, that's one of them. We have to find a way to, one, wake people up to what's the truth, that there's so many bad things from different bad places, whether it comes from money or religion or greed or all the 7 sins or who knows where it might come from. We have to first wave a flag, say, hey, look at the truth. And then on the other side, we have to say, hey, we can do something about it. And music can, what do they say? Music is the universal language. Well, that means that no matter what kind of music I play, if I would go to Japan, or if I go to whatever, Israel, or I go to South Africa, or wherever, all the places I've been to, everybody recognizes that as something positive or healthy or a good feeling, or in many different levels, And so therefore, in a crisis especially, like now, we need music.
We need music,
Another little side story that maybe you don't know about is, I go to Japan. I've been there, over 60 times, 60 tours in Japan. And remember Fukushima back how many years ago now? I don't even remember, 8 years ago, 7 years, something like this. I had a tour literally 2 months after Fukushima. And I got a call from the guy I was working with, the guy named Eiji Nakayama, a bass player. And he said, man, do you really want to come and this and that? And I said, no, are you kidding me? Everyone around me said, no, don't go. I mean, from my parents to my, at the time wife and so on and so forth, they all said, what are you, crazy? Of course, I said, of course I'm crazy. I went, So I went there, and the people were so overwhelmed that I would come and play these concerts and not give up any of them. In fact, we were supposed to play a concert in Fukushima. We had a concert scheduled. That was the only one we had to cancel because we just couldn't get there. In fact, we had, the trains were shut down. So we had to drive everywhere. But we had, for me, it was like, I don't care if it takes us an extra 5 hours, because we'd have the highway goes right through Fukushima. So we had to go all the way around, on and on like this. And we did all these concerts, and we, of course, asked for donations, and we sent them to the Red Cross and different Japanese organizations that were helping. And to me, it was really one of the most emotional tours I ever did. Just don't run away from that pain and disgust and whatever, whether it's a natural disaster like today, which has been turned from a natural disaster into a political disaster, and then an economic disaster, and on and on and on. So for me, it's, we have to, in a way, do what we can to do concerts, whether there's 5 people there or 7 or what, if that's all that can be allowed. I'm not gonna cancel because of that. If somebody else does, which a lot of people, of course, as you know, have been. But I think it's really important that we step up, we as a community of arts, whether that's dance, music, theater, whatever, we've got to do whatever we can to wave a flag. And it's not about money. I mean, everybody's struggling, and as you know, so many people in the music business, arts business of any kind, right now, it's a disaster for people to survive. But anyway, if we can, we got to do it. That's how I look at it. So
that brings me to just a question on the tip of my mind. Because when I met you, I was very young, 16, And I brought some of my favorite CDs, like Herbie Hancock CD, Michel Petrucciani CD.
Yeah.
I remember bringing a Maceo Parker CD, and then you had personal stories about all those guys.
Sure.
And of course, you were kind of an idol for me, not only musical-wise, but also as a person, very, very friendly and giving all your information away. But then later, I thought, okay, you have to work on yourself, you get better in music, deeper into music, and then also your personality gets better somehow. You get less ego, but I realized it's not always the case.
Not always, yeah.
Because also musicians have those problems of greediness and
competition.
For example, I remember like the Austrian main piano player, Joe Lovano. Yeah. I always admired him for putting together bands with people from all different countries, and then he also talked to the people and said, hey, we have peace on stage, and we don't speak the same language, but we can play through music, which is nice. Yeah. But on the other hand, I know he was a very strict leader and not always friendly to his musicians.
Yeah, exactly.
So... How do you go about that?
Interesting thought.
It doesn't mean if you get better in music that you are getting better as a person.
Not necessarily. It can, like you say, it can work that way. I mean, I think music doesn't always go hand in hand with personality or personality with music. It can. Yeah. I don't want to talk names, but just say, in my career, I've met people who were the biggest assholes who played the most beautiful music. Yeah. And you're like, well, how does that work? Yeah. So I think, sometimes I realize that in a sense we have a private self and a public self, and they can really be different. I don't want to get too deep into any people, but for me, I just think that I've used, maybe I can just say for me, maybe, for me, I never felt like I was a very secure, happy child. Mm-hmm. So for me, music was my way of getting inside of me, inside of myself, to know me. Just simply at that simple level, who I am, what do I believe in, and how I think, and because once you go down the path of music, if you're an aware person, which maybe that's part of the problem, a lot of people are not aware. If you go down the path of being aware in music, you start to question the world, people, yourself. How do I fit? What's important? Why even bother doing this stuff? And so on and so forth. And if you go further and realize that music can have many purposes. It can be for meditation. It can be for self-help, like self-help book or whatever. It's like it really can heal you and heal the world, as we talked about in a different way. But not always. I think some people get down the music path and forget about that. They just want to be maybe a good musician, and then they run into the world of out there, not the inner world, the outer world, and there's your competition, or they're struggling to make money, to get whatever, be the best in the polls, the critics or whatever. They got to be better than the other guy, and all those kind of things. The human side of people come out in the public world, where the private world can be very different. So I think we're confronted, not especially even today. Look at the music business. I'm sorry, but the music business has really kind of collapsed in many strange ways. So it's not even, money, forget it. I mean, it's just, what is that? Music and money don't even fit together anymore, which maybe in one way could be good. Maybe we get back to music as music and these other positive things. Could be. But at the same time, we have to survive. We have to pay our rent, all the things we got to do. So that world out there has really become, in a way, more competitive because of that. Because how many jazz schools are out there today all over the world?
Yeah. Putting out
tons,
millions of students.
Really, and some really, really good ones. Yeah. And guess who's teaching them now? Well, when I grew up, the teachers were not necessarily the greatest players. They were maybe good teachers. There were some, of course, But today, everybody needs a gig. So who's teaching? Joe Lovano goes and teaches. Chris Potter teaches. You know, the great musicians are out there teaching these young guys from day one, so they skip over the stuff maybe I had to go through and figure it out for myself. Where they just tell them from day one, and they go, "Oh, thank you, I'm already done." It took me 5 years to figure that out. So in a sense, the young people are getting better educated much quicker, and so the competition grows and grows and grows. And of course, being a kind of a jazz-oriented musician, there's not a lot of room. Jazz is and not because it shouldn't be, but because there's not enough people that like it to buy the things or come to the concerts or whatever. There's just not.
Yeah.
In jazz,
but isn't that also at least a little bit our fault as well?
Well,
of course. I mean, I know that discussion very well. You know, being with managers, with labels, and then also with other musicians. Some musicians just think about their music, nothing else. And you are maybe more in that direction, and more. I'm also meeting with other people who really try to present themselves, and it's really hard being in the middle of that. Also myself, I'm a very this situation, just talking to you is fine, but in general, I'm a very shy person, not talking much. But on stage, on the other hand, I'm playing a lot, I'm getting out of myself. But also then how to present yourself, you know, when I'm giving interviews, I'm still, again, that shy person in a way. You know? And it's really, that's also a tough one for me. Being a shy person myself, I mean, I grew up very, very shy, which is why I could put myself so easily into music. It was a way to be in my own world, my own inner world, and so for me, it was almost an escape from my shyness, you know. But it's interesting. I'm the same thing when I get on stage. It's like I have no fear. Oh, not none, but I mean, you know, I still get a little nervous sometimes. But in general, I feel safe there with the music, with the piano. Maybe because it's a big object, and you know what I mean. I don't know why exactly, but I just feel safe there. In the real world, you know, if I can talk to you because we were friends for many years, but if it was somebody I didn't know and it's just somebody from a radio station, I'm a little hesitant. I don't always want to tell the whole story or the honest story 100% or whatever. I don't say as much as I know I could, or I don't want to offend anybody. You know, all those things that shy people tend to do. So I understand that world of standing up for yourself is very difficult sometimes, doing what you really want to do. Rather than what an agent wants you to do, or a record label wants you to do, or a club wants you to do, or whatever, a radio station wants you to do, blah, 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 blah. You know, we're often controlled by other people. I remember for my very first recording, I called up Kenny Garrett, because I was playing with Kenny Garrett a lot at that time. And and he was just getting, you know, starting to be famous. He got with a big label and, you know, all that stuff. And I called him and he was like, "Oh man, I would love to do it." Because I told him who was playing on it. He was like, "Oh man, I would just love to play, but I can't." And I said, "What do you mean? Why?" He said, "Well, now when you get to a level where I'm starting to get to," he said, "you have to have agents, lawyers, your record company, and on and on and on." He named, you know, 5 or 6 different people that decide what he does, who he plays with, what labels he can be on, and so on and so forth. He said, "I lost all control at that point." I mean, I don't know about now. I haven't talked to him for a while. I saw him a couple of years ago. But, you know, he maybe now has more power to do what he wants because he's gotten big enough, you know. But back then when he, you know, he had to say, "Okay, yes, sir." So that we're often controlled by other people. And he even said, he said to me, "Man, enjoy where you're at." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Because you can do exactly what you want to do musically. And who you want to play with is just whoever you want to play with. You know, nobody's going to tell you yes or no. Might be about money or some other things, but you can really call up anybody you like. And if they like you and want to play, they'll play, you know, that kind of situation." And so that's, you know, that's an interesting place to be. And again, maybe we're talking about the dichotomy between what we are, what kind of person we are, and what we're expected of, or how we have to survive, and in this other world. Again, private and public self. They're really two different things. And it's also, for me, it's not a conscious decision. Maybe it is
No.
at the beginning, but it's step by step. You know?
Sure.
You get more and more people telling you what to do.
Sure.
And then at one point you realize, oh, I'm not in control anymore.
That's right.
Which is sometimes also fine. With my label, I'm still happy because I see that the input they give, I still see value in it. You know,
Sure.
And it's fine. Yeah.
You know, you put out all these CDs here, right? And if I look at them, I mean, they're so different. And I don't mean just different, but I mean really different. There's so many different things. And that kind of freedom that I have with nobody telling me what I have to do or don't have to do, I can do all these different things.
Sure.
You know, I'm not restricted into any little box. My box is open. But here's the negative thing about that. A lot of the critics have no idea what to make about me. For years, they've been writing things like, I don't get it. He's playing down at the Knitting Factory with some really, really avant-garde group, and next week he's going to play with Pee Wee Ellis and Fred Wesley and on tour and, you know, playing funk music. I don't understand. They really would, often I've seen that kind of critic. They don't know where to place me, you know. So that's the negative side. In a sense, I can't be known because I do a lot of different things.
Yeah,
you know?
People don't know what to
what
know
to
you
expect.
for.
They would buy this record and go there. I have no idea what it's going to be because it's true. It's completely different than this one, you know, so on and so forth. You know Thelonious Monk. That's what he does. He did what he did. That's it. No question. You know? So certain people can be easily put in a box and be talked about and be understood, and the people would buy it for just because they know what they're going to get. If they look at this, they go,
Yeah, sure.
What
But
do I
how
do?
did you deal with that? In terms of music, was it for have you ever a problem? For example, tonight you played free jazz with Dewey Redman, and the next day you played funk music, and the next day very traditional jazz.
Sure.
Did you was it more like in projects, like tour-wise or stuff, and you had time to adapt, or could you really switch from one day to the next?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, easy. Not at least now for sure. I could just turn on the phone cat or whatever whatever you have to do. Maybe in the beginning I was hesitant because I maybe wasn't clear what it was I needed to do. But like anything you do, you go down the path of something, and then you learn about it and you get better at it, and so on and so forth. I think it's interesting, you know, from my earliest memory of buying LPs back in the old days. My first two LPs that I bought were John Coltrane's Selflessness, which was quite avant-garde oriented, and Oscar Peterson Night Train, swinging like crazy. I mean, really swing. So really kind of traditional and avant-garde, let's put it in that way. And for me, that was always my first steps, maybe that's the right word, steps into the music. And I always... Let me make it not always. Let me just say, since the beginning, I've searched for different things. I'm a person who likes the idea of many things. I don't want one thing. I don't want to be identified as one thing. I've never just said, I want to just buy the John Coltrane records. Or, I said, no. And what about this? And where that led me to that, and this led me to that. And pretty soon I had, my collection of LPs back in New York, which I still have. It's just everything and anything, and it's. I have no fear of it, but I also realized that each of these different things that that exist, because I love so much about all of them, and as you know me, I research, I read a lot about them. I really know history. At least I try to, so that I can understand how it works. Who was it? Who do I listen to? What did they do? Why did they do it? What was the musical things that was going on that made them sound different? Why does McCoy Tyner on Selflessness sound different than Oscar Peterson on Night Train? What were they doing differently? So that's always been kind of my quest, more and more and more, to understand the details of, even within, say, traditional music, like you meant, for example. I mean, every little part of it is really different.
Yeah, sure.
You pick avant-garde. Now, today, I think there's even hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of avant-garde ideas. So that's over the years developed in different ways. So to me, today, in 2020, man, we've got so much out there. And to me, it's a never-ending possibility to learn and grow. You know, because nobody can learn all that stuff. It's just too much. So you find what you love or you enjoy, and then you go down that path and you see how far you can go if you really like it. And at some point you say, no, let it go or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, of course, but how do you get then to that level that the famous and great guys of that kind of music, they call you, you know? Because I would assume that when you play with somebody like Stan Getz, you're playing more kind of in a certain style of music. You're playing a lot of standards. And then I would assume you get famous for that, and then people of that similar style, they would call you. But you played in all kinds of... How does an avant-garde guy who wants to have a piano player, how does he get the idea to call somebody who's playing with Stan Getz, you know?
I think a lot of, for me, is because I was meeting a lot of different kind of people. As I think I've told you years ago, I used to have a place to play. And in New York City, that's not so easy to find, you know? I lived in this all-Italian neighborhood.
You moved to New York like in the 80s.
This is 1980, I moved 1980, and I was there till 2000. So I was really there full-time, 20 years. And the apartment I had, the only other people in the apartment were musicians. So we had a house that was a music house, and the other musicians were jazz musicians and were great musicians as well. And so we had, I mean, every day, I would say almost every single day, I had some kind of jam session in the afternoon from 1 o'clock to 4, and, you know, often I had gigs at night, and I was writing music and practicing in the morning. So it was like every day was music, music, music. But the point is that because I had this kind of open situation, somebody said, hey, let me invite so-and-so, you know, and then somebody said, hey, let me invite. So pretty soon you get to meet all different kinds of people because everybody had their own focus. And then they, in a sense, they hear you and go, oh, he can play straight. Oh, he can really swing. Or, oh, he can play really free or really out. Or, and then I would write my own music. As you know, I've written hundreds and hundreds of pieces of all different kinds. And then, so of course, I write music for people to come over. Oh, so-and-so's coming over. Let me write something that'll be a good challenge for them. Then they say, oh, he can write too. You know, so all these different little avenues kind of led to some other avenue. You know, one person thinks, oh, he'll fit really great with him. And so they come over to play with you. And then, oh, yeah, right, great, you know. And then you kind of get pulled into different worlds. And so luckily I had this place. And secondly, luckily, I got to meet the right people at the right time somehow. I feel sometimes magic in a way.
It's hard to imagine for me because I grew up in this small town in Austria, and then I moved to Vienna and Berlin, which are still compared pretty small scenes.
Compared to New York.
And also a different time. I mean, I've been to New York many times now, but it's different. When you go to a jam session, you have to wait for 2 hours because there is a list of people who want to play.
Yeah, for sure.
So this, maybe...
It's not so easy. And also the jam session was at my house, which is comfortable. We can do what we want. You know, sometimes at a jam session in a club, you got to play standards that you don't even care about. It's not really music exactly like you want to present or show people what you can do. You know, I'll tell you a story. I think I told you this years ago. This was like, I think in shortly after I had moved there, my friend Anthony Cox, who really has helped me a lot too, I must say, in over the years. And we said, hey, he moved like a month after me. So I was there first, got my apartment. He was staying with me. And we said, hey, let's go out to a jam session. So we went to the Jazz Forum. At the time was when I got to New York, there was only a few lofts left. There's a loft scene in New York in the 60s and 70s where, you know, people would, in a sense, play concerts in their living room, basically, you know. And a loft was these old, at the time in the 60s, illegal to live there. But people did, of course, and, you know, the artists and whatever had always found a way. And so there was only a few left, and one of them was the Jazz Forum. So we went up the elevator, and some of these lofts have no doors. You know, the elevator is the door. You open the elevator, and you go to your place already. There's no hallway. There's no nothing. You just go walk right in. Right? Okay, so Anthony and I were going. He has his double bass, and the door opens, and somebody from the stage yells, "There's a bass player!" you know. And Anthony's like, "What?" You know. And so Anthony he says, "Come on, hurry, get on stage!" Right. So he takes his bass out. He goes on stage, and to make a long story short, at that jam session were like 4 or 5 quite famous people. After that, 10, 15 minutes on stage, he came off and he had gigs for the next months. And his reputation was solid already from that one moment.
Okay.
Now, I also was there. But like you said, if you're not somebody that's needed, like maybe a bass player, especially, no offense to anybody, but a black bass player, he just got a chance and then, immediately was on the scene. I couldn't even get on stage until like the end of the night. It was the last song. It was really bad musicians, and so of course nobody cared and nobody paid attention. So I kind of went home really sad and disappointed, but I also learned that night what New York was all about too. The difficulty of it, the expectations of it, the racism of it in different ways. I don't want to say it too strong, but it's definitely still part of that scene. It's gotten better over the years and so on and so forth, because musicians have always been black and white and Hispanic and whatever, have always found a way to be together in certain ways, and certain times better and certain times worse, and so on. But it showed me, a bit what I would have to face being in a city like that. So it was an interesting evening. It really taught me a lot, because soon after, Anthony moved out in his own apartment and had gigs like crazy. I mean, really working big gigs almost immediately. But he never forgot me. And this is the part, I always, in any interview where I'm talking about myself a little bit, which I don't exactly like to do, but if I have to thank anybody, it's him. How I got to play with Stan Getz, it's Anthony Cox. He was playing with Stan.
Played in that band.
Yeah, it was actually Victor Lewis and Anthony, and I don't remember who the piano player was. It's on the tip of my tongue. It'll come to me, I don't think. Anyway, so he couldn't do this tour, the piano player. So Anthony called me and he said, "You're going to get a phone call in a few minutes." I'm like, okay, cool.
Okay.
And he didn't, when he said, "I won't tell you who," and he hung up. And I said, okay. So the phone rings and I'm answering, and "Yeah, this is Stan Getz." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, Anthony, you're right." I thought it was a joke. You're just teasing me. And I know that voice. That's. He said, "Yeah. Do you have a passport?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Can you leave Friday for a tour?" Okay. "Yeah, okay." It was really like that. Boom, 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 boom. And then he said, this is the weird part. He said, "Bring some tunes to play."
Okay.
"Bring some tunes to play? What do you mean? It's your band. You're Stan Getz. Well, I'm just the guy you're asking to come and play a little tour, And that's how it started. And so we went on tour, and it was really quite... I'll never forget the very first gig, Lyon, France.
Okay.
We went on stage. It was Terry Lynn Carrington, Anthony, and myself. We went on stage. The audience rose to their feet and clapped at least 10 minutes. They wouldn't stop. We hadn't played a note. We were just looking at each other like, what the heck? And finally, Stan is like, okay. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Please sit down and we want to play. And, that's my first memory of that night. The second memory is... everybody thinks of Stan Getz as this kind of quiet, easygoing, Girl from Ipanema player, right? That's what everybody thinks of him. His first tune we played, in the old days, they didn't count like we do today. 1, 2, I want. They would do with their foot. But he was at the stage, I don't know why it was so loud. Boom, 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 boom. And that was the start of the first tune. And I'm like, whoa, freaking out. What the heck was that? And he played hard. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like Stan Getz to me. So right away I realized that I learned many things that night. Man, first of all, don't put your mind and think that you're right and what you have. Don't pigeonhole anybody. Don't think, don't trust recordings. They're not always the truth. Don't believe because one recording is famous that that's really what they do, and on and on and on. It was really, that whole night was really an eye-opener. And then the final thing that I'll never forget, which made me as proud as anything I've ever happened. There was a tour agent guy there that night. And as we're walking off the stage, he turns to this guy, and I'm right behind them. He says, "I think we found a piano player."
Okay.
And I was like, oh, God, that's just, wow, great. So anyway, but those kind of memories come because of Anthony Cox. Really, a lot I have to thank him, and I still do. You know, I always think whenever I can. And the same thing with Fred Wesley. So you have some Fred Wesley stuff here too that I still do.
How did that happen? Because you were talking before, like a little racism in general, and then I'm seeing you in a sometimes all black society in a way. I mean, those guys,
because I got
guys
past it.
Invented funk.
But you know what? It's because of Anthony Cox.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, not because of him, but that's one of the reasons. It's like if you get accepted in a certain group of people, and somebody says, "Hey, he's okay," then you have a chance. And then if you're a nice person, which I try to always be anyway, and do a good job, you're in anyway. It's okay. You know, so a lot of it was that he gave me, in a sense, the stamp of approval.
But
now,
did he also play with Fred Wesley?
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's another story. Okay, how do I start with this? You know, because Anthony was playing with Jerry Allen a lot at that time in the Jerry Allen Trio, and Fred Wesley had done his first record. Okay, let me step back. Fred Wesley is really in his head, is a jazz musician. He sees himself that way. His father was a big band leader. He played in the big band as a kid. It's just how he sees himself. He's a jazz musician. I mean, he's a fantastic musician, really. And then in a certain way, he got waylaid, like a lot of musicians, into a gig that makes money, which is doing more soul and funk music, which I've learned is actually great. It's not something negative, but you know, sometimes your heart is still in being a jazz musician because it's just something you believe in more, whatever. So I don't know about Fred exactly what he thinks about that, but I know that his main desire for years has been to be a jazz player. Okay, so the first record he did on minor music, I think it was his first anyway, of his own, he had Jerry Allen on piano. Well, of course, Jerry then recommended Anthony. So that on that very first record was Anthony and Jerry Allen. So he was going to do the second record with Jerry and Anthony. Well, Jerry couldn't do the gig. So Anthony again calls me and said, "Man, what are you doing on Thursday?" It was like maybe 2 days later. Jerry is supposed to do this recording. I recommended you because he needs somebody who can play jazz and a little bit of funky music, which he knew I could do or like to do. And that's how it began. So I did this recording, and it was Bill Stewart on drums, and it was Carl Denson on trumpet. It was on Carl Denson on saxophone, Hugh Reagan on trumpet, Maceo Parker was playing, and Fred, of course. And there was a singer too. There was also a singer involved. So anyway, and that was, I just thought that, okay, my little recording with Fred, how lucky I am, and blah, blah, blah. And then I thought nothing more of it. I thought that was the end. A couple months later, Fred calls me and says, "Hey man, we're going to do a tour to promote the record. You want to do it?" And I'm like, "Of course." So that's how that whole thing began. Again, Anthony Cox recommended me, gave me the stamp of approval. And Fred is not, he sees you as a musician. He doesn't look at your skin color the same way. I mean, maybe at some point, I suppose, in a way, but it's not his focus at all. And again, the same thing, if he hears that you can play and he likes you and you're a nice person, he don't care. But, you know, I've had a lot of trouble in that band. Not from the band, but from the audience.
Yeah, I can suppose.
You know, honestly, people will come up to my face, say, "What are you doing in this band, white boy?" kind of stuff, or and I'm, what? One time though, and only one time I remember, we were like, you know, after the gig, we were in the foyer, and people were talking, and some guy, a white guy, came up to me and was like, "What are you doing in this band? How, you know?" And Fred was standing just around, you know, and he heard him. And he came up to the guy who got really close to him and said, "Do you hear how he plays?" So it just, you know, it was one of those, again, good moments for me that I realized how much he appreciated what I can do. And again, that was really great. And that was also through Anthony Cox. And then each of those gigs, in a sense, kind of leads to other things, too. Again, playing with Stan Getz is like a huge stamp of approval. Really, really huge. and same with Fred Wesley.
Yeah.
So that's how I could play with Pee Wee Ellis and later on more with Maceo and so on and so forth. You know. But still, Fred is my main guy, and still today, probably my longest main gig that I've been doing.
25 years now.
Yeah, almost 30 years
30
now.
years, yeah.
Almost 30 years. It's probably, I think it's 30 years this year or next year.
Amazing, yeah.
And it still goes, and we still do tours. Unfortunately, not now, but so. Okay, so anyway, that I don't know what your question was anymore. But I guess the idea of how do you spread and get people to call you from different worlds, you know, and it's interesting, you know. It's always somebody leading you to somebody in New York. I remember a lot of the things I also got. I have to thank Steve Johns, a drummer, who at the time was playing with Thomas Chapin.
Okay.
And also was playing with the Mingus Big Band. And many other gigs too. I mean, he's just one of the swingingest, really great drummers in New York. Kind of a unsung hero who should be given much more stamp of approval from the world, you know. And from that, he was one of the guys that would recommend me to Thomas Chapin, and also about Mario Pavone, two of the biggest guys that I ended up working with in that kind of knitting factory scene, which led me to all these other guys that I could play with, you know, the Tony Malibus.
I was also I wanted to ask about that because, as I already told you, I came to you with my Herbie Hancock CDs as a 16-year-old.
Sure.
And then you showed me a lot of this New York downtown music, which I really got in love with.
Yeah.
But I realized not many of those musicians or bands, not many of them used a harmony instrument. Not even many of them.
Yeah.
There are not many piano players in that scene.
Yeah, that's true.
It's more like horn players with rhythm section.
Exactly.
And you are one of the, there is Myra Melford comes to mind, and now some younger guys like Greg Taborn.
Yeah, exactly.
But you are one of the few harmony players those guys use in a way.
Sure.
What's your thoughts about that?
It's a good question, because it's true. Because that world, starting with Ornette Coleman, where a lot of that world really comes from the 50s, that world was often without piano players. Yeah. There was always a few piano players who I loved that were in that world. Paul Bley, as a perfect example, who found a different way to approach the piano itself and not think of it strictly as a harmony instrument, to think of it as a linear instrument, one, and two, as a rhythmic instrument. And so therefore, in a way, I always found ways, playing with those kind of people, to use those two things more than the harmony part of our instrument, right? And not that I avoided, because I often would find ways to freely add harmony, but let's call it freely movable harmony. So in other words, they never gave me chord symbols, ever. They just gave me lines. Yeah, sure. Mario only would write mostly 99% line. Yeah. So I have the line and I have to invent something, you know. So I was always inventing, and I don't want to say harmony, let's just say intervals. Ideas, sound-wise, that could go along with these melodies, or just melodies themselves, or playing the bass lines, which he would often give me too. So I'd have all these other things to deal with. And that's how I often approached the downtown scene. And with Thomas, I think one of the things that he liked about me was that I could do both. And he, at the time when he died, sadly, was trying to figure out a way to create a band that could involve both things, both harmony and no harmony. And he knew that I could do that, because he knew guys that could do no harmony, but they couldn't do harmony, or guys who could do harmony but couldn't do no harmony, or just put it that way. And so he knew that I liked both worlds. I enjoyed the challenge of that. And also, he was very much interested in African music, which he was the guy who really helped me get involved with it. And also that we would go together to record stores, and he would show me, get this one or this one or this one, because they're the ones you should hear. Because he really was an expert at African music and recordings. And so he really kind of got me into the study of African rhythms and particular tribes and so on and so forth from different countries. And So he knew that we had a kind of a thing together in different ways, not just about jazz-oriented music, but shall we say the origins of jazz music. Go back there. And that really got me into the study of the origins of so much of what we're doing, and other music as well. You know, and how it's moved from Africa to Brazil or Cuba or Venezuela or South Africa to there. You know, every country from Africa went somewhere else, and we get different kinds of music around the world because of that sadness of slavery. You know, so we've got so much great music in the world because of this mixing sometimes in a very positive way. Yeah. You know, like in Cuba, where they needed something to do, you know, there's nothing to do at that time. So, hey, great that we can make music together. Versus America, which tried to stop making music together and prevent the African slaves from making music. And the only place they were allowed to do it was in the church. So, of course, now you have all kinds of things evolving out of that, you know, and so on. So that's the other thing that Thomas and I kind of saw eye to eye, or how we really fit together, and why I was lucky to play with, to me, one of the greatest geniuses I've ever got to meet and experience and talk with and play with, and the philosophies, and you know, he was just an amazing character. So anyway,
I'm also very fascinated about what I like about those downtown scene, especially are the drummers. Who are playing very creatively with the drums and using different sounds and still a little bit of rock elements. And I remember a time when I started studying with you, that you flew to New York maybe every second month or so, and you always came back very motivated and said, well, I just played with this new kid, Sherry Cleaver, or now played with Matt Wilson, and talking about, and then I checked out those drummers and really fell in love with that kind of that style of playing the drums, you know, changing very fast, and a lot of accents, and a lot of surprises.
Talking drums. You know, so much of the early traditional way of playing jazz was repetition. You know, it was not about the same kind of talking. I mean, they were talking in a way, but it was often a very repetitive kind of talking. I mean, the talking came a little bit on the snare drum and the little things there, but it was still a kind of a steady, repetitive type of beat. And then as that loosened up, where they didn't need the hi-hat anymore on 2 and 4, and that steadiness of this could be played with in different ways and expand and expand and expand and expand. Again, starting with people like Ornette Coleman, or, you know, really pushed the boundaries of what the traditional drummer could do. And that evolved into so many different things. And I think some of it also came because the whole downtown scene was also about composition. So no longer was it just like a jam session. Think about how many recordings were made to imitate a jam session, and you as the audience listening to it were kind of getting a secret peek in the door of what the musicians were doing behind that closed door, you know? And so, ooh, cool. But it was a jam session, kind of straight oriented, a little freedom, you know? Well, think about it. A lot of the record labels in the 50s, say, they didn't want anybody to come up with some big compositions. They wanted a feeling of just we're in the spur of the moment. So a lot of times they just wrote a couple blues notes and then they recorded that day, you know. So as things evolved more and more, and again, Ornette is one of those early guys, that the compositions became just as important as the improvising. And that whole concept kept growing into what I see as the Knitting Factory world, which kind of doesn't exactly exist anymore, but the ideas still are around and have grown more and more, that the compositions become more and more important, more and more complicated, more and more full of so many things from around the world. Talk about world music. I've always seen jazz in a way as world music. And today it's really extreme, the combining of Indian rhythms, for example, all the drummers that have been studying, say, tabla or whatever, the Dan Weisses of the world, you know, that they're like, wow. And that the music gets more and more complicated with the time signatures, or with even measure by measure, changing the time signature. It's just grown and grown and grown. And then the musicianship, having to be able to improvise with that stuff, has grown and grown because of that. You know, that the challenge of the composition has forced the musicians to even know more about improvising and get deeper into being a better improviser in a complicated setting, which I know is partly what you're interested in. And me too, of course, that I'm an old man, but I ain't done yet. So, of course, I keep working on all that stuff, and I try to improve, and I try to, most of my new compositions are in odd meters because, like I did in the beginning when I had my jam sessions when I was living in Brooklyn, when I first got to New York, it's the same reason. I want to challenge myself. I don't always write it for the other guys, though of course I do too, but I'm doing it to challenge me. So I can practice doing, how can I play an 11 or 15 or 13? Can I do it? And I do. Now I'm not great at it necessarily, but like some of the young guys, because that's how they just grew up on that stuff. But it's partly why, music to me should be evolving. It doesn't need to stay static. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I do all these different things. I somehow look back in history and I try to learn all these things, and then each one is going somewhere. None of this is dead. Jazz music is alive, and really alive today. Not in terms of gigs, in terms of the music. When I was there a couple of years ago, I remember we were having a conversation, and I don't remember, I know Mario was one, but I don't remember who else. We were just having this conversation. And we were saying, hey, you know what? The music is better now than the history of jazz music. The music has evolved to so many, many incredible things. But, of course, how many people want to hear that? The audience is really, really small. And what can we do about it? Is there anything? Should we do anything about what? I don't know if it's possible. Only one out of 100,000 people, musician-wise, can actually get through and do something and survive, maybe in a sense, playing music that they want. It's not very many anymore. And you have to be really skillful or really something new, maybe, or sadly sometimes look right, or all the different reasons why people get through today.
Yeah, sure.
So. But that's New York. It's partly.
I was also thinking about the difference because I grew up here in Austria in the countryside.
Sure.
And you didn't grow up in New York, but
I grew up in Racine, Wisconsin. It's about an hour north of Chicago.
Then you went to Minneapolis.
Then I lived in Minneapolis for 3 years. I was there, and that's where I met Anthony. Well, actually, I met Anthony in the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, where I went to school. And it's a university kind of the northwest part of Wisconsin, and had a very good jazz program. Really, really fine. There were like 4 big bands, and for a little tiny school, what? It's crazy. They even had a jazz club. It was crazy. It was an amazing place. And I was just graduating, and in walked a guy. And remember, this is a pretty white area. There's hardly any. Where I grew up, no. Where I grew up has a lot of black people. I went to school in a, shall we say, mostly black and Hispanic school for junior high school. And my high school was more mixed because it was a little bit from all over the place. But in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I'm sorry, but it was lily white, I guess you'd call it. And in walks a black guy with a bass, and I'm like, oh man, who is that? So he stopped in his tracks. And he said, I heard about you. I'm like, okay. You're Peter Madsen, and come with me now. And then we're going to go, where's a practice room? We're going to play right now. I really like this. And we became friends almost instantly. And we went and played some music together, and that was it. We were just hooked, as friends for life, basically. And then he was from Minneapolis, which is where I was moving. I decided to move there first, and I was dreaming of going to New York, but I was scared, wasn't ready, or all that kind of stuff. So I went to Minneapolis, and he decided not to go to school there. So he's living in Minneapolis. So we started playing together in Minneapolis, jam sessions, and then we got gigs together. In fact, we had a lot of gigs together then, working with singers. I was working 7 hours a night for almost the whole time I was there. It's no joke. And then in the afternoon were jam sessions, often with him or some other good bass players that were in Minneapolis. And then we would meet as a duo because we had heard about Bradley's. Bradley's is one of the great clubs in New York, but it was a duo club. There were no drums. So we would, hey, let's practice like we're going to play at Bradley's. Like, real seriously. And so we'd work on this stuff, and we'd have all these different things. He was really interested in Dave Holland. That was his kind of hero at the time, and other, of course, a lot of other people. But somehow that idea of mixing harmony and freedom and time but no time and twisting the harmony in different ways was what we were doing. So we'd do things like, okay, let's play a blues, but don't play any blues, but keep your place. I'm like, okay. And I try to keep my place and not play the blues, stuff like this. And then every once in a while we'd, okay, here we are, here's one on the top, stuff like this. We would practice these things, how to be more modern and whatever. So we were kind of egging each other on to different things. And then I decided finally to move to New York, and he moved just shortly after, I think it was about a month after. But Minneapolis was a really good ground for me to feel my rebellious side. Yeah. Because I wasn't in New York, I could do whatever I wanted. Nobody was watching. Yeah. Nobody cared, really, in a sense. Yeah. So I had these bebop gigs, for example, with a real bebop saxophone player. Yeah. That's what he did. Yeah. That's what he believed in. He talked about Charlie Parker. He saw Charlie Parker, whatever, this kind of... Yeah. And he'd always say stuff every night because he saw bebop as music you have to sit and listen. He'd say, no dancing. He'd always say it during the gig, every gig, he'd always yell at the audience, no dancing. And we'd be playing these, Charlie Parker tunes and standards or whatever. But I said, I didn't care. So I would play like Cecil Taylor, just, up and down while we're playing these tunes. Yeah. I was like pushing the boundaries at all angles. And sometimes we'd play really out jam sessions or whatever. And then because there was a big avant-garde scene at that time in Minneapolis. Yeah. And so I'd be playing more straight because I just wanted to be contrary, I guess. I don't know. That was maybe part of my nature. My rebellious about what I'm supposed to do. Yeah. I didn't want to supposed to do anything. Yeah. I want to do whatever I wanted to do. Yeah. And I liked the idea of playing old school on top of new school and whatever you want to call that. Just never really having to really feel like I must fit in. But then sometimes I would, to say, okay, see, I can do it when I want. I'm choosing this. But, I got to New York, and that got me in trouble.
Okay, yeah.
Serious trouble. Yeah. I remember the first jam, or maybe the second or third jam session I went to at somebody else's house, right? And I went there, and they were playing standards and tunes and nothing special, whatever. And I was doing my out and crazy stuff. And they all went in the kitchen on the break, and they wouldn't talk to me. Okay. They literally wouldn't look at me. Yeah. And I'm like, what did I do wrong? Yeah. And then I did this a few times with different people. And then, I don't know if you know Dick Oates, one of the great saxophone players of New York. He came to me once, he said, man, you can't do that. You've got to pick something and kind of do that, and don't mix all this stuff together. Yeah. So I went home from that moment, and I was like, man, should I really do that? Yeah. Pick one thing and become that. And it really took me a good couple of weeks to really get inside of that, what that meant, And finally it just hit me, I don't want to do that. I want to be myself. And if I don't get gigs, well, then I go back home, a little like this. Yeah. So my rebellious side turned out in a way good, because now I can do a lot of different things with a lot of different people. I have a lot more experience than most people, luckily, because I could do these different things because I kept my mind open instead of closed. Yeah. Which is part of the problem of New York. It's a little bit restrictive. It's a great place to hear history, because everybody's there, or was there, especially the time I was there. And so you learn so many different things there, but at the same time, there's a lot of boxes there. Yeah. And the boxes are from style. The boxes are from what university you went to. Yeah. Oh, he went to Berkeley. Oh, he went to North Texas. Yeah. It was like weird. Yeah. These guys were Kentucky guys. These guys went to Indiana University. And I'm like, huh? I just went to a tiny little school that had nobody went to except Anthony. He was the only guy. And he didn't even really go there. I just met him there. Yeah. So, these things, New York is sometimes a difficult place for that. Right. You have to get beyond all of these weird, things you have to confront as a human being, as a person, and again, just try to find your way through it, whatever that is. And again, my way at the time was really just focus on music, all the different kinds that I like, and keep going down those paths and learn and grow and become better and improve. And the more I did it, the more it actually worked okay. You know, I never had a lot of money. I never, you know, that was never the issue. But I'm here. I survived. You know? I'm still going through musical things, you know. And then I came here and little by little started to teach more and more and more. And then, of course, that grew into a whole other big giant thing. So.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about your teaching philosophy, if you have one. Because I remember, I mean, I came with my band to make some workshops with you, first the HDV trio, then also random control. And I also remember, you know, there are certain spots in where you really, it hits you, and you really remember that. And I remember there was the band, KDR Society, founded by a drummer from here, Alfred Vogel, and some great guys, Mike Mondesi playing bass, and Harry Song playing the guitar. And then there were some gigs where you couldn't do it because you were traveling with Fred, I think.
Probably,
And you asked me to sub for... Yeah. And I did a few gigs with them, and I also did a part of a workshop in Grein, Upper Austria.
Okay.
I remember that, and I think there was just one piano student and not many students, and then a drum student, and we were playing like workshops with them, and we were jamming with them. And I remember, although, of course, Mike Mondesi and Harry Sump, they are also great teachers, but I still remember that the energy wasn't that well at that period of time. Somehow the students were beginners and then were too overwhelmed with all the information. And then you came, like 2 days after that. And the energy was, they were a little frustrated. I really felt that those students, they were really frustrated because of all the things we showed them.
Sure.
And you just said to the drummer, just one sentence, I don't remember, just one sentence and one sentence to them. Then you just sat down and the energy somehow changed. I think you have a gift of, it's not much, and if you hear the sentence, it's just maybe one sentence about something specific. But you find what the people, doesn't matter if they are beginners or advanced, you find at the moment, you find just the right thing they need at that moment. And then they start smiling and they start playing 5 times better than they did before. And I experienced that quite a lot also with my bandmates. Are you aware of that, or are you
No, not exactly. I mean,
it's not only about the information; it's you
absolutely.
Somehow.
It's of course it's my goal. If you're asking a little bit my philosophy, I don't have an exact philosophy, except I try to look at what the person is that's coming to me. I make sure I ask them if it's the first time, or then further along as we go along the way. What are your goals? What do you want to do? Where? And then I have them play, and I try to see exactly where they are at that moment in time. And I always said, whatever. I understand people are nervous when they first meet you and all that stuff. So I try to get beyond that, and I try to look for, I ask myself, what is this person's next step? Again, whether they're beginners or very advanced, what is their next step? It's my way. It always has been my way, and maybe in the beginning I wasn't. Maybe when you first started, it was near my beginning of being a teacher in a way. I probably had it okay then, but I think now I hope I've gotten even better at it. It's I don't know if it's a gift or what it is. It's just somehow I can have a band come in or a single person come in and find out what's missing or what would give them positive something information-wise and also motivation for their own selves as human beings. Because to me, it's not about information always. Sometimes it's just, so many lessons, people just walk away going, I can see them shaking their head like, I've never heard anything like that. How come I've been studying for 20 years and I've never heard that before? And things like that, And it's coming more and more. It's interesting. Even this week, it just happened again. I found something that opened up a door. I always find out that there's doors that we have to go through to get to the next room. And in the next room, we got to play around for a while, whatever ideas are there, and then look for a new door. And sometimes the door isn't what you expect, and sometimes it's tradition, and sometimes it's something, about them as people, as personalities, or their fears, or their what they think they're supposed to be doing versus being free and opening up to themselves. And my goal is always to get people to be themselves, to express themselves. Not me. I don't want you to sound like me. I'm not going to give you information that made me. I mean, if you want it, I can share it with you. It's okay. I'm happy, as you know, I'm happy to share anything.
And it was a crucial moment. Also, I think we were working on my first solo piano CD, and I was fooling around with a repetitive pattern on just 1 or 2 notes, and I really practiced it hard, over weeks and weeks. And then I came and I still wasn't really happy about it because it was still not perfectly tight. And then I played it for you, that piece, and still wasn't happy about it, but you liked it and you loved it, and you told me, hey, it's great, and you evolved, and you will evolve more if you do it more, but don't be so strict about it. It's also the things you, in a way, the things you can't do that make you the musician, because then you said, hey, I could never do it like this because I just...
something you were working on, I never took the time.
And that was a crucial moment for me, that I don't have to know everything. I just have to pick the stuff I love in a way and get better in that.
Absolutely. Well, as I've probably told you before, that's one of the reasons I don't teach at a university. Universities tend to be places where you have to do certain things. The students are expected to do this to graduate even, and I disagree with that. It's those specific things that if I say you have to do it and you have to do it and you have to do it, you all have the same information. Well, then that basically going to sound pretty much alike, You just maybe put the information together in a little different way, but you all got the same information. To me, that's just the first step. You should try these things. The next step is the most important. That is to put your 2 feet on the ground and say, this is what I love the most. And this is okay, and that I don't like at all. Great. When you can put your 2 feet on the ground and say, I don't like that, then please leave it out for now. And you kind of like something, that'll come a little later. The stuff you go, I just love that stuff. Whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. That's the stuff I want you to work on, because that's what you are. Finding the things that you love is exactly what you are musically. So only look for that. Leave out the rest of the stuff for now. And maybe as you go older, like me, I'm always looking for another step, and you change, and your ear changes, your thinking changes, your philosophy changes, and you grow. That's the best way to grow, because it's a way for you to really find yourself rather than all the information in a book. Then you might as well just go out and don't take a lesson and buy what's the book here? Mark Levine book, and I'll just go through page by page and like this encyclopedia of everything in a way. But it doesn't help you to become you. Because jazz music is not about the information. It's about who you are, what you like. If you like Cecil Taylor and that's what you want to do, figure out everything you can about Cecil Taylor. If you love Bill Evans, okay, what made Bill Evans? Now, don't copy him, because that's not good either. But what made him? What did he do that you really loved? What was it about it? Was his touch? Was it the harmony? Was it the inner voice movement? Was it the bass lines? What was it? Was it the feel? Was it the style of swing? There's no right answer, no matter what anybody says. There's no good or bad. It's just what you like, you personally. And that's how I've always taught. And then also realizing that if you're a beginner, I'm sorry, but it's just sometimes frustrating just to play a B-flat 7 in the right, with some good notes or whatever, So you've got to find the way to encourage people when they find that. Great. It's one little thing, but it's still, for them, maybe a big thing. What's small to you might be huge for somebody who's just loving the music, but they're not fast with it or whatever. So that's kind of my general way of dealing with teaching. And that also, because of that, I see that teaching is like an improvisation. I think a lot of people teach out of a method, in a sense, a kind of a method, and here's page 1 and page 2. And I don't have any method, as you know. Everybody I teach differently, completely differently, depending on how I find them and what I see. You know, with some people, I just say, okay, they want to know about standards and what that is. And the next guy, they just want to play free. But how do you do that with somebody who's just a beginner? Or what about young people? I met a girl who had been playing for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years and couldn't read a note. What do you do with that? And then I started to little by little find a way. And I said, for her, she wants to do free improvisation, knowing a little about harmony, so I had to show. And then stories. Please tell me a story about blah, 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 blah. And then she would sit, and she could do it. She'd go on for 10 minutes about, you search for those kind of things. And as I've gotten older, I've got more little things I can use like that. But again, everybody's different, so I don't give that to everybody. I watch what people are like and what they're, what's the next step for that person. So that's my teaching. But I never was planning to be a teacher. That was not my goal ever. It's a little unusual that I've become so entrenched in it. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. I have less time for my things, but at the same time, I've learned a lot by being a teacher. And exploring new things down further a path than maybe I normally would have. So having students like you, for example, I had to be on top of the stuff to keep up with because you were very fast at learning things. So I had to think of the next step. Do I know a next step? And also because I was a very intuitive player. I understand things now, and I really can explain, whatever harmony theory and all that kind of stuff pretty well. But at the time, and I knew it pretty good then, but not. I was still more of an intuitive player. So I had to figure out how to explain that intuition to people like you. How can I tell him what I'm thinking about? And therefore, as you remember, we didn't only talk about music.
Yeah, of course.
That music is just part of life, and it's often connected with dance. It's often connected with art, paintings or sculpture. It's often connected with theater and so on and so forth. So then we discovered people like Sun Ra, for example, who was about all of those things, dance and theater and poetry and all the different things that he did. Whether it doesn't matter to me whether you like him or not, but the ideas that come from people like him that can expand our thinking, what music is about and how we present it. The Art Ensemble of Chicago with the costumes and all those different things that they were presenting, and hundreds of instruments on stage. So we had our first group together with this collective of improvising artists, the CIA, and we were kind of a little bit imitating a combination of Sun Ra and the Art Ensemble. So we had everybody had different instruments to play, and lots of percussion and keyboards and 2 drummers, and just everything was possible, and it's okay. Electronics, that we saw the freedom within music, and yet with composition and arrangements and so on and so forth. But all those kinds of things lead, I think, in a way from my love of different things and my openness about it, but then also through my teaching. So it kind of, in a way, kind of comes together that when I start thinking about those things and those people, it opens me up to try different things musically, too. So, anyway, I don't know did that answer your question?
Great.
Yeah, teaching.
But I came to my mind before because we were talking about Vorarlberg, Austria, and New York.
Yeah.
I grew up here, and I soon had to organize my own bands, my own stuffs, because here is not a big scene where you get called and then you have jobs.
No,
it doesn't.
Yeah.
So I've always been a leader my whole life.
Yeah, sure.
And you started more as a sideman.
I was really a sideman. Yeah.
One of the,
I mean, tons of stuff.
Tons of stuff. Yeah.
And these are just a few. These
when
are
was did you had a? Did you always wrote your own music? So was there a transition? Of course, now you moved to Austria and you had to do the same thing as I.
As you,
of course,
exactly.
you had to do your own.
That's a lot of it.
But there is also like that 3 of a kind thing that
I was still in New York
still
for those things.
Somehow your trio.
Yeah, exactly.
Was there a transition between sideman and leader, or was it not that conscious?
It was not so conscious. I mean, in a sense, the Three of a Kind was the rhythm section for Fred Wesley.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it really came out of that.
Yeah.
That the record company called me, and his first question to me was, "Do you like the three sounds?"
Okay.
And as you know, I'm a record collector, so I have I don't know, half a dozen Three Sounds LPs from back in the 50s and 60s, and he said, "Yeah, I want to do a recording with that kind of idea. So it's bluesy oriented, but lots of standard kind of sounds and stuff." And at the time, I'm like, "Okay, cool, that sounds good to me." Yeah. So we decided to go in this direction. We formed this group. Like the Three Sounds, we're the Three of a Kind, so it's a similar kind of idea, and that's how we started. And the first album we did was just a trio, and it was more standards, really like the Three Sounds, trying to play standard songs, but with a bluesy element in it. That was our goal. And I never really saw it as my group, though.
Okay.
Though probably I did most of the arranging and changing the fixing the chord changes, and piano players tend to have to do that anyway. But so it was more of a cooperative group in a way. But in a sense, it was my first little step into in a way being a leader. But it's funny, for a lot of things I've done, I've still been the leader. But my name was never on it as the leader. I worked with singers and did recordings, but I was the guy who did all the arrangements. But my name is nowhere. So in New York, here's the singer's name doing a gig at whatever Fat Tuesdays, and I'm nowhere to be seen. So on and so forth. Okay, so in a way, I've always been in a way the underground helper for people. And sometimes they hear my compositions and they'll say, "Hey, great, can I use one of them, or two of them, or whatever, like this one here." So Gus Tillis, there's me, I had a gazillion of them. This was great with Joe Lovano, and at the time I was playing a little bit. This was actually my second recording with Joe Lovano. I did a Japanese recording with Joe.
Okay.
Maybe a year or two before that one. But anyway, Gus, I was working with Gus. He was the booking agent at Visiones, which was a great jazz club in New York. And he was a vibraphone player. And he was a friend of Anthony's. Again, there's Anthony Cox again. And he would hire himself and his band to play at Visiones, at least, once a month or so. We'd have a weekend or whatever, and always it was me. I was his piano player basically most of the time. Not always. I was on tour a little bit, but he would call me most of the time. And it was always really great people. And Joe Lovano was one of them, or Billy Drews was one of them. I mean, some great people. I mean, really, some amazing people I got to play with there. Bill Stewart was often the drummer. I don't want to go into this. This one is Billy Hart. It would play sometimes. Or just many great New York players. So sometimes I was lucky. They'd say, "Hey, bring in a couple tunes for the recording," that kind of thing. But again, I was never the leader. It was still their thing, and they liked my composing, put it that way. So that was my kind of, in a way, underground way, and then Three of a Kind was a first step into that. In fact, it's interesting. The second thing we did with Three of a Kind was with Stanley Turrentine. And an interesting story about that.
Okay.
Because thank God we were a cooperative group. So I was parking my car. I was picked up Dwayne and Bruce at some place and brought them there, and I came. I was the last person to come into the studio, and Stanley was there, and everybody's setting up, and then Stanley sees me. Now Stanley's old school.
Okay.
Serious old school. He looked at me like, "What the hell are you doing here?"
Okay.
And I'm like, "Okay." He looked at me and said, "Are you the boss?" "Are you the boss?" And luckily, I said, no, we're a cooperative trio. Because I understood what he was getting at right away. I could feel it. I said, no, we're a cooperative group. We're happy we work together. We are all equal partners in this. We each actually wrote a tune or two for you to maybe try. And also, I brought a bunch of standards. You can pick whichever ones you like to play. So I tried to calm it down really quickly because I saw where it was going. If I was not a nice person, I would have just said something else. But I didn't. I knew the old school ideas. They'd have to test you first. So we do the first tune. I don't remember what it was. I don't remember. It was mostly like kind of standard stuff. So we played the first tune, and after the first tune, we're going in to listen to it and check the sound and all that kind of stuff. And he leans over to me and says, "Can I get your number before we go?" So from the opposite, it's really turned to the complete opposite. But that's the old school. You have to be tested. Can you play some bluesy stuff? Can you, which is what we were about. And it sounded good. It was nice. The whole thing was really cool. We were swinging like crazy, and it was really a great experience. But it took me to go through that process a little bit, that he then right away pretty much accepted. And then he started calling me for gigs pretty soon after that recording. So what turned out like it scared me to death at that moment. What do I do? That is so right in your face, And it worked out fine. So, and that's a great recording, really a great recording, one of my favorites.
And there's another one with Benny Golson.
Yeah, that's this one over here. That was with Benny.
Funny enough, there is Till Brunner on it.
Till is
he must
the
be
German.
Very young.
Yeah.
He was playing the.
Yeah, no, it was it was really an interesting experience, and also Conrad Herwig, the great trombone player from New York, and Benny actually made a new arrangement for 3 horns of Killer Joe, one of his most famous pieces for, and it's really cool. He really made kind of real out modern, really very, very interesting. But again, we were just swinging, but most of the things on there, I don't remember. A lot of them are my tunes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tunes are mine, So again, it kind of was leading into that leadership, but it's not my nature. I'm a shy person. I don't like to take the lead and talk in public, and that's hard for me, So step by step, I guess. And then when I came here, like you said, in a way, if you're going to do anything, you have to be the leader, or it's not going to happen. And in a sense, that's how the CIA was born, out of that need, desire, and even a little further. I mean, I must say that also it was developed because otherwise I was going to leave. I was offered a job to teach at a university, which I didn't really want to do, and I needed a good excuse to say no. And they said they wanted me, and I'm like, oh no. So a bunch of the guys around here went to the government and said, "Hey, we got to keep him here. Please keep him here. We need somebody like him." So they came up with a funding. What do you call it? Like a grant money, I guess you'd call it, to keep me here. So that's how the CIA was born. And originally it was just one group. We made a large ensemble with 14 people, 15 people. And not a big band, though. I didn't want to do big. Everybody did big bands. I was not interested in big bands. I mean, I like playing a big band because I played in many famous ones, but more because there's too many big bands. Everybody has a big band. I wanted to do something as me. I'm a little bit rebellious. I don't want to do the same. So that's how it started. And now there's, I don't know, since then, I think 12, 13 different bands. Maybe 14 now. Because I have new ones that you don't even know about.
Okay.
So anyway, that also has forced me to be a leader, both in composition, arranging, and of course then organizing rehearsals and all the different stuff that you do with groups, And that's hard. I mean, it's a lot of work, really a lot of work. But I mean, thank God that the government has done it and continues to do it. And thank you. Everybody. Because it does keep me here, and it keeps me going, and keeps me really having to do new things. Because almost every year I start a new group, almost every year. And we do recordings, and there's some of them here, and we got some other here. There's all kinds of things we've been doing. Cool. Anyway, if that want to talk more about that or something else? What else? People?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's also interesting, as you said, in a way, the perfect sideman first. You were the perfect sideman.
It was interesting to be a sideman. Yeah,
but then you also, how did that feel for you? Because I mean, of course, you played with them old school guys we talked about, but you met also these young. We talked a little bit about like Kenny Garrett or Chris Potter.
Sure.
But they were a little younger than you, I think. And you
Yeah,
met,
a little
met
bit.
them
A
on,
little
on the
bit, yeah.
scene.
Yeah.
And then they started to get really, really famous,
Really
and
famous.
leaders.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
You stayed in a way the
I was
sideman.
still the sideman, yeah.
How did that feel, or somehow watching your colleagues
Yeah.
grow into
Sure.
stars?
Stars,
yeah.
really stars, yeah. That's an interesting subject. Nobody has ever asked me such a question, but honestly, it hurt me.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be honest, it really hurt me. I thought I was as good as them, or at least close enough, and maybe I'm not. Maybe that's what I always question. Maybe I'm just not good enough. You start wondering. Well, maybe I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
And maybe it's true. Maybe I don't. Maybe they have something different, a certain personality. Again, shy people don't have an easy time in New York. Fighting through the record labels, because it is a competition. I was never the guy to go up and shake hands with some famous guy to try to get a gig, like some guys. I know guys that literally call up Sonny Rollins every day to try to work with him. Back then, not now, of course. He's sick, but I mean, I never did that once in my life. I relied on people believing in me and passing the word on. Now, that's slower. And it's not going to get me very far, very fast. And as I was too shy maybe to be a leader back then, it didn't get me very far. So in a sense, I watched and they respect me. Every time I see people, these old friends of mine, I saw Kenny Garrett about 3 years ago, and he just came up to me and gave me the biggest bear hug, and we started talking, and remembering those times. He used to call me for his gigs. I was a substitute for Mulgrew. So, okay, he must have thought enough of me that, I get calls to do these things. And, it was hard. It's been hard. And then in a sense, when I came here, it was even more difficult, because now I'm not in the center of where it could happen. I'm no longer even potentially able to you have to be there. You have to do the jam sessions at somebody's house, and you have to keep up with all that stuff and meet the new guys and who's on the scene and, all that kind of things. So that hurt me for a while. But in a way, some of the things that continued, like playing with Mario, it continued for a number of years after I was here, for maybe a good 10 years before he kind of realized I wasn't there anymore, and he just kind of moved on. And we're still friends, and we talk once in a while, and just so on and so forth, but just not around. So being here, that this collective of improvising artists stuff really has helped me, being a leader, to learn something new. For the first few years here, I really was just like in tears every day, because what am I going to do in this place? There's nothing here, and compared to New York. There was things here, but not very much, compared to New York, which there are hundreds of thousands of great musicians and clubs to play and blah, 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 blah. And here, there's just a handful of things to do. So, okay, what am I going to do? And luckily, when the CIA started, at first I didn't realize how important it was going to be for me. And it has become important because it's how I learned to write for larger ensembles, how to learn to be a good arranger, how to be a leader, how to organize, how to motivate, people in the group. And in a sense, how to always play at my highest level, that people around me have to rise up. That they have to say, you know what, I can't do that, but I got to try. So all of these different things, I got something different. If I was in New York, I would have never been able to organize large ensembles. It's too expensive. You can't do it. You simply cannot. Just renting a rehearsal space, $30 an hour. You want to rehearse every week with 3 different groups. Who's got that in New York? No way. It's impossible. So in a way, I was lucky that the school where I teach in Dornbirn has facilities with some nice rooms and nice pianos that I can actually rehearse and run these organizations and really have a place to do a lot of stuff. And because of the funding of the government, it can continue, and we can make recordings and things like that, that really helped me to go forward and motivate me, because otherwise I would have just sunk. If I didn't have it, I would have either sunk, or I'd have to move back to New York somehow. So now I still go back there. I don't have as much to do, much connection, but I do have one.
Yeah.
The newest one, the newest CD with Michael Musulami, who's been the record label, even for all the CIA things.
Yeah.
So all these things that I've done with the CIA, which we've done, I don't know, a dozen different recordings now, he put them out on his label, Playscape. So, and just, we did an album years ago, and it was called Part Pitbull, again, a duo with just guitar and piano, which is kind of unusual. And we did a second one just recently. I was there in New York in August last year. And we made this recording, 3 hours, we were done, you know, boom, 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 finished. And it's really, really, it's a great recording, no question. It's been getting already great reviews. It just came out 2 weeks ago.
Great. Amazing.
Fantastic. So anyway, things are still going, and I still have a reason to go to New York, but it's less and less, definitely less. I still have a little apartment there that I, can go to, and my stuff there. My LPs are still there. My Steinway's still there. I got to find a way to move it over
Bring it here.
Yeah. So
Great.
It's so many, in I don't want to say as a conclusion, because maybe you have some more things, but as I'm thinking about this stuff, man, I look at this stuff, and this is maybe what I don't know.
Have you ever counted on how many CDs?
I'm over 130 now, something like 135, I guess, different CDs. And really some really great, really special things I've gotten a chance to do. I mean, like, do you have any of the stuff with Kenny Garrett? I'd recorded 3 records with Kenny Garrett.
No.
And great recordings. In fact, I remember one time, Kenny was in an interview asked. They said, Kenny, you do all these different kinds of music. You play kind of funky music with Miles. You do, straight ahead with Freddie Hubbard and these kind of, modern straight ahead guys. And you play even some really wild kind of avant-garde things. He said, could you recommend 3 albums that we could listen to that you think are the best within those categories? And he named one of the records I did with him towards the more avant-garde stuff. So I was like, okay, he sees what we did as somehow important or really good, that he would tell it in an interview, this superstar now, So things like that, it makes me feel very lucky. And that's what I was going to basically get to, that I was lucky to meet people that really believed in me and wanted me involved, and, some little guy from Wisconsin and now Austria, that I can still make music at the highest level that I at least I try to, and that I got a chance that these people would ask me to do stuff with them, and that my goal to make them sound good was the right way to go about it, And I learned, though, that I have to also find a voice that includes all of this stuff. And maybe that's something I've been trying to understand, though we talk about, you do this and you do this, but as I've gotten older, I realize that my voice, you can still hear me, whether I'm playing straight or I'm playing out or funky or a combination of the different things. I think you still hear me in there, and that's the thing I'm really proud of in a way. I have certain dimensions that are wider than most, but it's still a unified kind of thing. And I think it's because I never learned a lick, an idea. I just have always played from somewhere inside. And I realized I could do that when I was a kid. I really knew that when I was a kid. And I never lost it, though people have tried to stop it. Like going to New York when you're told you should just do that. That's the kind of way of taking away that open freedom of expression with this certain kind of energy or inner combination. Just say inner feelings. Just leave it at that, because that includes a lot of positive and negative and powerful things and mild things. And I think that goal has always been in the forefront for me, no matter what I'm doing with these people. Kindness, inner strength that is inside, but I don't always have it outside sometimes, or that I can keep my ego down enough that I want to support whoever I'm playing with, but at the same time have a voice when it's my turn. I'm going to show you what I am and what I can do. And that's tricky. It's like a weird balance that you have to kind of keep alive. And I think I think I've done mostly pretty good with that. You know, not always maybe, but I'm not perfect. That's for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. So.
Hey, great.
Mm-hmm. I think
Thanks.
that's
that's nice.
good place to end.
Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, man, I haven't listened to these things in a long time, man.